Usually because it never stays gold backed for very long. That's usually the problem. Gold backing requires a third party. Somebody has to hold the gold itself. And then they print currency based on the amount of gold holdings that they have. This has been tried a lot. I've covered it many times on throughout my work, throughout my body of work, going back to the very beginning several years ago. That's the problem, is that it requires people who are honest to hold the gold, who aren't going to inflate the gold amount, or that the auditors aren't going to take a bribe, or that the auditors themselves aren't in on it, right? Like that's sort of the challenge with it. So anytime you try a gold backed or anything backed type paper or digital currency, you end up with this. You could, in theory, nowadays with today's technology, do a orange internet money backed currency. I'm still hesitant on the idea of backing something. You're better off just you're better off just transacting the actual currency itself, rather than trying to back a currency. But theoretically, let's go with this. In all seriousness, you could theoretically, with today's technology, back a currency with orange internet money, because anybody can audit that, right? Anybody can go and audit anytime they want. You don't need to be an auditor. Anyone can audit the amount of orange coin they claim they have versus the amount of money they're printing. However, it still doesn't solve the problem of counterfeiting. And there will always be counterfeiters, because there's always going to be people out there who don't want to do any of the actual work. This is just reality. So there's always going to be somebody who wants to do something counterfeit. The founders of our country, for example, the US, the reason they made, the gold and silver, only gold and silver shall be currency, gold coin specifically. The reason, I think that was 1791, I think is when they did this. The reason they did this was because then it made it impossible for another country or an invading army, or anybody for that matter, to undermine your country, because counterfeiting and fiat currencies and central banking, right, or what is colloquially referred to as central banking, they are more destructive than any standing army. They are more destructive than any nuclear stockpile that somebody could have. They do this kind of damage, this type of neutron-style damage that you're seeing right now in the greater economy. What's the greater economy? That's just the greater people. When you look at the people, it's like that's exactly what it is. The damage that you're seeing to the people that everybody's seeing right now. It's like the TikTokers the refugees going over to Red Note, that are saying, like, they're starting comparing notes with the people in China. They're like, hold on, like what do you mean, like we live in a system of of control and oligarchy and so forth? Yeah, this is stuff that I've been covering for many years, as have many others. We've been pointing this stuff out, that a lot of what you're seeing is a delusion to kind of suck you in to this idea that this is going to continue working, and that everything can always go up. Right, and this has been spun, unfortunately, into the idea of late stage capitalism. And the theory of capitalism, let's be fair, is that it is a free market. Now, what does a free market mean? And this is where it makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. Free market means that you can fail miserably. Okay, so I'm not trying to get too far afield. I'm answering all of this, but there's a lot to unpack with this. You can fail miserably. You are supposed to be able to. You are supposed to be allowed to fail, right? That's the theory behind it. This idea that, well, it always has to go up and it always has to involve people being added. I saw that Aaron over on 42 on YouTube did a video on birth rates, 37 minutes long, which is impressive. And it's stuff that I've covered a lot, as have many other people. We've talked about this for many years. And if you followed my work for any length of time, or anybody who's followed my work for any length of time, or if you scroll back through my stuff, my hundreds of videos long enough, you'll see there's a consistent theme of me talking about this stuff. That yeah, I mean, it requires this endless idea of always everything up. And that is not supposed to be a free market. A free market would say something like this. Some people go and buy a bunch of rental properties, or a bunch of properties they intend to rent out, and they pay a bunch of money for them. But then they need higher rents, and the markets just don't support those rents. And what they do is start screaming and yelling, well, but I was promised a return. I deserve a return. And I'm entitled to a return on my investment, even though it's not your investment. You borrowed it from the bank. They conjured it from nothing. So you're basically just an entitled boomer douche, right? That thinks that you are entitled to make rents off of other people that are beyond the market, right? And I've covered that hundreds of times. That is the problem, is that when people begin to think like that, they start thinking in terms of, well, I deserve X, Y, and Z, as opposed to something as simple as this. I'm happy to be healthy, have all my digits, and can do some work and earn and genuinely have the opportunity to earn something or build something for myself and for my family that we want. Right? That's actually huge. That alone is gigantic. That didn't exist for a long time. The US was the exception to the rule with that for a while. And it was because the currency wasn't able to be manipulated. 1865, however, changed that. And we created the Secret Service. This is all public record. You can look all this up. And the Secret Service's job at the time had nothing to do with protection. That came around way later on. It had to do with catching counterfeiters, people who were the wrong people who were counterfeiting dollars. That's what it was. We want to allow certain people to counterfeit our currency to worthlessness to expand the economy. That is not a thing. You don't expand the economy by counterfeiting. You expand the economy by having kids. But that doesn't fuel industry. Right? That doesn't fuel the fever dreams of people saying, I want to have this big massive behemoth type system, as opposed to a functional system that works long term and that requires maintenance. You can have any civilization you want if you're willing to do the work to maintain it, right? That's the rules. If you create this fake economy idea through counterfeiting, then you eventually have a collapse. You eventually have a calamity. You eventually have people seeing through it, and they start going, hold on, like none of this can really work. This is an unworkable Ponzi scheme, basically, and that's exactly what it is. So, to your question, this is all related, and this is me trying to encapsulate years of me explaining this stuff through hundreds of videos. That's why the idea, and I'm not picking on the question because it's a great question. It really is. It's a fantastic question. It's a question I wish more people were asking. But yeah, that's why it's hard to do that, because there's always going to be a group of people who don't want to actually be productive. They don't want to build anything. They want someone else to do it for them. And rather than bring something of value to the table, it's just, well, let's counterfeit it. And so the idea of anything backed, it doesn't mean that's why the BRICS countries, for example, and I've done probably a dozen videos on BRICS. BRICS countries, they started off with the idea, let's have a gold-backed BRICS dollar, and that lasted about 3 minutes before they realized we can't do that, because there was no way to pay for all of the promises we've made to all these other people, right? Just like, again, like I said, just like on RedNote, you've got a bunch of people comparing notes, and you have a bunch of people in China that are saying, oh, my life is really awesome. Everything here is fantastic. You guys are the poor ones. This is how it always is. Keep in mind that China also has huge amounts of problems. They also still have lots of poverty. They have lots of slave labor. I mean, yeah, you see one thing. It's just what you see. It's facade. It's no different than a Potemkin village, and anybody can look that up. It is true everywhere. It's true everywhere. You're always going to have the people that are doing all of the work on the very bottom of the economy, as long as you keep conjuring their money from nothing and then stealing it back through inflation. I hope that helps.